Why is there suffering in the world? If God is omniscient, omnipotent, and perfectly good, then he should know of suffering, be able to eliminate it, and be willing to eliminate it. Yet the world clearly contains war, disease, death, the suffering of innocence, and natural disaster. And so, people have reasonably raised the question, does such a world still allow us to believe that God might exist? This is not a superficial skepticism. On the contrary, it is a question that theism must face with full seriousness. Any answer that too quickly describes suffering as a beautiful arrangement may inflict ethical harm on those who are genuinely suffering. Suffering is real. Pain is not an illusion, and it must not be romanticized. And yet the question remains, does the existence of suffering logically entail the non-existence of God? A critical distinction must be drawn here. The logical version of the problem of evil holds that suffering and an omniscient, omnipotent, perfectly good God are conceptually contradictory. The evidential version holds that even if the two do not form a strict contradiction, the scale, intensity, and distribution of suffering in the world still makes God's existence less probable. The former asks us to show whether God and suffering can be coherently conceived together. The latter asks us to go further and explain why so much suffering, so deep, so disproportionate, is permitted to exist. This video does not attempt to resolve all suffering lightly. It advances only a more modest argument, that suffering makes the existence of God difficult, but does not necessarily make the existence of God impossible.
Genesis chapter 28 offers an important image: Jacob's ladder. Jacob falls asleep in exile, in uncertainty and the unknown. He sees a ladder set up on the earth, its top reaching to heaven, with the angels of God ascending and descending on it, and God speaking, promising, and present above. This image can be transformed into a philosophical thought experiment. The earth represents the finite world, suffering, exile, imperfection. Heaven represents the divine order, the highest good, the kingdom of God. The ladder represents the passage between the finite world and its divine source. The angels represent transmission, connection, and mediation between heaven and earth. And God represents the highest ground that gives this passage its ontological efficacy. The point of Jacob's ladder is not to say that the world is already perfect. On the contrary, it appears precisely within an imperfect situation. Jacob does not see the ladder in a state of stability, success, or freedom from suffering. He sees it in exile and uncertainty. What this image reveals, therefore, is not that there is no suffering on earth, but that the suffering on earth does not necessarily mean that heaven has already closed. If God and suffering cannot be simultaneously conceived, then the existence of suffering would straightforwardly refute God. But if God is understood as the ontological ground of being, goodness, truth, and ultimate meaning, not an object among objects, not a local cause within the physical world, then suffering does not constitute a decisive logical refutation of God's existence. It more likely reveals that the present world has not yet fully manifested the completion of God's kingdom or the highest good. When a person says that the innocent ought not to suffer, this is not merely a description of fact. It is an appeal to a moral standard that stands above mere fact. Physical facts can only tell us that pain occurred, that death occurred, that war occurred. But physical facts alone cannot tell us that these things ought not to have been so. When we protest against suffering, we are already standing on some normative ground. We believe that justice stands above violence, that repair stands above destruction, that the lives of the innocent ought not to be arbitrarily sacrificed. This moral protest itself may point toward a source of goodness that transcends the merely physical.
To make this argument more complete, several supplementary dimensions must be included. First,
Free will. If the world contains agents with genuine moral responsibility, then freedom cannot be a pre-written program. Freedom makes love, trust, loyalty, and goodness possible, but it also makes betrayal, violence, and evil possible. This cannot explain all suffering, but it does explain why moral evil may arise in a world that contains genuinely free agents. Second, soul-making. Certain virtues, courage, compassion, patience, forgiveness, and a sense of justice can often only be formed in a world that is finite, fragile, and marked by conflict. This is not to say that suffering itself is good, but that a person's response to suffering may give rise to moral depth. Third, the stability of natural law. For the world to be intelligible, actionable, and a place of genuine moral responsibility, it requires a stable natural order. Yet the same set of natural laws that permits life, embodiment, learning, and technology may also bring disease, disaster, and death. If every harm were immediately cancelled, the world might cease to be a stable domain of moral action. Fourth, eschatological fulfillment. If the finite world is not the final chapter, then the meaning of suffering cannot be fully judged within its current fragment. If God exists, He does not guarantee that all pain immediately disappears, but He guarantees that suffering does not hold the final word. This does not dissolve the problem. It refuses to let pain be the last answer of existence. Fifth, divine hiddenness. People often ask, if God exists, why does He not make Himself more plainly known? This is a serious question, but it may be that precisely because the relationship between persons and God is not a matter of coercive epistemic possession, but involves trust, freedom, seeking, and response. Divine manifestation does not always appear in an overwhelming form. Jacob's ladder is not a simple answer. It is a structural image. It tells us that there is still suffering on earth, but that heaven is not necessarily closed because of it. That the finite world is still broken, but it may still be called, repaired, and lifted. Therefore, when facing the question, if God exists, why does the world still contain suffering? The more rigorous answer is not, I have fully explained suffering. The more rigorous answer is, suffering genuinely constitutes a serious challenge to theism, but it does not constitute a decisive logical refutation of God's existence. Suffering reveals that the world is not yet complete. Jacob's ladder reveals that an incomplete world is not necessarily a closed one. If God exists, He is not a simple answer that cancels all questions. He is more likely the ontological ground that allows questions still to be brought toward truth, that allows the broken still to be brought toward repair, that allows suffering not to become the final answer. And so this argument's conclusion must remain humble. It does not say, suffering proves that God exists. It does not say, suffering itself is good. It does not say, all pain can be understood by human reason. It does not say, those who suffer ought to stop protesting. It says only this: suffering makes the existence of God difficult, but does not necessarily make the existence of God impossible. If the world remains capable of opening toward goodness, truth, justice, and redemption, then God may still be understood as the ultimate ground of that openness. The question may not be whether suffering can be fully explained by us, but whether suffering must become the final answer. The image of Jacob's ladder offers this response: it need not. For even though there is still suffering on earth, the road toward God may not yet be closed.